Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lloyd, and I'll be your moderator today. I'll be monitoring the Q&A and the chat box, so feel free to ask any questions during or after the presentation. The presentation you're about to see is pre-recorded, and Doug will be live after the presentation to answer any questions you have. Well, let's get started.
Well, I guess this is happening. My name is Doug Bulleit, and I'm not going to spend any of my allotted 10 minutes here talking about me. You can find more information about that, um, along with this unshaven photo of me, in the chartware that's somewhere available on this platform, or LinkedIn, or just give me a call and we can talk. I would, however, like to spend a moment setting the stage for the decentralized theme of this entire presentation. Zooming out and up to 500,000 feet, the decentralized identity and consent management platform that we call Fireblocks finds itself at the fulcrum of a perfect storm, one gathering at the convergence of healthcare delivery and consumerism typhoons. Here again, I'll defer delving into the value based cost drivers on the supply side and the patient engagement objectives on the other. Instead, I'll go straight to the common denominator of its implications, which involves sharply increased patient control of their health information and the corresponding new dimensions of risk. Risks that are brought on by the new levels of data liquidity prescribed by things like the 21st Century Cures Act. Speaking of new, let's turn right away to the new tools and techniques available to meet and exceed these challenges. It begins with the increasingly ubiquitous supercomputers that most everyone now carries around in their purses and pockets. But by adding a digital wallet, a set of standards based cryptographic PKI tools, that along with various biometric GPS accelerometers and other inboard authenticators, they collectively facilitate a true adaptive and multi-factor authenticated user identity. And that significantly more trustworthy identity powers a persistent and a portable set of verifiable digital credentials. And that, in turn, enables Fireblock's surprisingly powerful active ingredient. That is fine grained patient consent management, the proverbial golden ticket that can leverage open network APIs like FHIR to achieve new dimensions of inter-system, inter-application interoperability. Now, before digging into the nitty gritty of how decentralized identities and verifiable claims work their magic, a few words on Fireblock's own genesis may help. It goes back to a guest lecture series that I was giving at Georgia Tech over 4 years ago now on permission blockchain, often called distributed ledger technology. Dr. Mark Bronstein is Georgia Tech's professor of healthcare informatics, who incidentally will be speaking later this week. Hope you'll take that in. Anyway, he observed that perhaps a decentralized architecture could solve certain trust problems that could lead to a constrained FHIR future. But inasmuch as FHIR is largely an electronic healthcare record affair, and most EHRs reside within large provider networks, Georgia Tech's lack of their own health system and EHR suggested a different venue. So we moved the program to the Duke University Health System. There, we set out upon a series of proofs of concept that patients could easily create decentralized identities, that those DIDs could be certified to such a level that enables the irrefutable authorizing consents that I alluded to before, consents that then can be actually written back into the EHR, and all the above and more can be indelibly written into an immutable distributed ledger. Pursuant to the POCs, we set out to identify several actual business uses employing our core value propositions. And what we arrived at involved various ROI or release of information applications. I'll return to those in this chart in a bit. For now, suffice it to say that emerging technical standards and business objectives have led us to refactoring Fireblock's decentralized architectures and its prospective business models. So, inasmuch as the Fireblock's thesis turns upon decentralization, it makes sense to ask what's wrong with traditional centralized methods like OAuth 2, OIDC, SAML, and so forth. And the answer is nothing so far as they go. And while we could quibble over various OAuth issues, the main drawback here involves it's essentially one to one to one character. One patient to one app to one scope to one EHR, etc., etc. And they're all controlled under the responsibility of the EHR owner vendor, not the patient herself. So, looking ahead to 21st century cures, GDPR, and other looming policy and privacy changes coming, delegated one to one methods will be hard pressed to comply and manage the strategic as well as the operational security risks that they'll bring. Now, let's take a look at how things will be done in an emerging decentralized world. DID puts the patient clearly at the top and in the center of the new trust triangle, specifically by equipping patients' smartphones with an advanced digital health wallet. A new era of digital security, privacy, and empowerment begins. It begins with the DID or Decentralized Identity document placed in an immutable blockchain ledger. The DID can advertise various smart contract triggering services that the patient may select, and at a minimum, it contains the patient's public key, with the private key always and forever locked away in the phone's impregnable, trusted computing environment. And in this way, patients can kiss usernames and passwords goodbye forever. Importantly, patients can associate their DID with any number of traditional digital credentials, thus creating a sort of inter-system patient identifier. Shifting now to how digital identity claims and credentials are verified, we go to the issuers. If we think about our identity more in terms of our physical self, the health record that can be exposed in a FHIR server becomes a treasure trove of identity claim verifiers. That is, through the magic of PKI cryptography again, a patient's true identity can be irrefutably verified simply by copying certain resources from their EHR FHIR server to the patient's digital wallet. Completing this new trust over IP triad of decentralized trust, patients can prove themselves to relying party applications simply by sharing these same digitally signed and certified credentials. The relying party, in turn, can prove the integrity and the provenance of these verifiable credentials, or VCs, as well as the authenticity of all counterparties through both inherent cryptographic PKI proof mechanisms and are just consulting the various DID documents and the hash transaction digests that are in the blockchain itself. Finally, in some cases, an issuer may want to revoke a previously offered credential. But the important business as well as technical point here is that the patient is in legal as well as functional control. And not to put too fine a point on it, things like HIPAA restrictions apply mainly to providers, not to patients. Interestingly as well, decentralized identity doesn't end with identity. The same mechanism that conveys and proves PII, or personal identifying info, can also be used to securely move PHI, consents, access tokens, and our protected health information itself. With that, let's take a quick look at a few decentralized use cases, once again starting from a patient-centric benchmark. Upon Fireblock's own three-legged platform, patient's journey and their protected health information can be taken through 6 steps. First, patients can bypass the annoying clipboards and paper forms. Second, a DID can be bound to verifiable claims from multiple providers, thus facilitating inter-system, inter-application synergies and passwordless connectivity. Third, patients' ability to place their digital signature upon complex consent forms made simple by quick TurboTax like interviews on their mobile phones. These digitally signed and actionable digital documents can draw from and or be inserted into legacy EHRs, thus facilitating lower cost release of information to third, fourth, and fifth parties as well as relying party applications. Finally, all of these transactions are hashed into the ledger, thus even though no actual PII or PHI appears in the blockchain itself, it can provide a zero knowledge proof of everything that happens across the network. So even though we obsess over maintaining the primacy of patient's control in a decentralized network, monetizable value is created elsewhere as well, namely on the provider side in at least 3 places. Clinicians, of course, but also within compliance offices and health information management systems. And beyond the clear opportunity, lower cost and complexity within providers' integrated delivery networks External network partners, payers, pharma, other clinical research, IOMT, etc., abound. Current examples of all this can be found in the Duke proofs of concept, where we initially focused upon internal workflow cost savings and risk management, to the current external frontiers, specifically how Fireblocks can anchor fine-grained consent management as a service offering that can solve pesky authentication and authorization problems in open network fashion for any and all applications and use cases. In closing, I'd like to return to this chart to note several key lessons learned as well as preview Fireblock's own road ahead. Just a few pre COVID months ago, seems like years now, we thought that Fireblocks was on a path to general availability by year end 2020. And while COVID, in fact, threw a wet blanket on many innovation projects at Duke and other places, in truth, we were seeing other problems mounting even before the COVID deep freeze set in. While post-change decentralized methods are far simpler and much less costly, a change this fundamental is difficult within a large single IT infrastructure. Second, relatively isolated use cases can have difficulty rising to an MVP level within a large single extant organization. Moreover, a distributed ledger implies a peer to peer consortia, a syndication process challenging even in normal times. In short, Duke suggested that, though more promising than ever, Fireblock's near term future may be better pursued through a leading tech and marketing partner. So, where does that leave us? As I said earlier, we're continuing to develop our fine grained consent management middleware, and we're refactoring our decentralized authentication and authorization infrastructure to be fully compliant with the W3C emerging DID standards as well as DIF and Trust over IP working groups. And we're actively recruiting application partners interested in Fireblock's unique consent management capabilities. But perhaps most important, we're now working closely with Microsoft on several fronts. We're reconfiguring Fireblocks as a cloud-based service on Azure. We also intend to leverage Microsoft leadership in scalable decentralized identity, and of course Microsoft's embedded market base plus its 600 plus business partner network comprise a robust distribution and service apparatus that even the most energetic startup couldn't hope to match. I'm not here today to make any market overhanging product announcements. That said, or should I say unsaid, we are targeting to have a Fireblocks consent management as a service offering available on the Azure cloud as soon as first quarter of next year. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have and eager to pursue any further interest in Fireblocks. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, let's get over to the Q&A section. Yeah, we have one question. What happens if the patient loses their phone?
Well, that's a good question, and actually, it's one that's been explored extensively in the Decentralized Identity Forum, or the DIF as we call it. There's several different approaches to that. The distributed key management protocol is probably the one that will emerge as the most prevalent. But there's also the Ethereum group has a concept in Newport they call trusted witness. There's ways that which you can effectively distribute your digital wallet in itself a decentralized way and recover it in a new phone or a lost phone in that manner. So there is a method of rehabilitating your digital wallet, put it that way.
Okay, thanks, Doug. We got another question. How would this work for groups without phones, like children, for example?
Well, I mean, there's no solution that meets every and everyone's needs, but in America, at least, and I'm sure it's a similar pattern everywhere in the world, over 80% of the population does now have a smartphone that's capable of supporting this kind of capability. So in the best spirit of FHIR, you know, the 80-20 rule, the Pareto optimization, anything that can address at least 80% of the population is probably good enough.
Okay, thanks. Oh, no new questions at the moment. Okay, yeah, we don't see anything. We've got another 5 minutes left, so if anyone's got any questions to ask, please feel free to ask them. Okay, Doug, yeah. It looks like we've covered all of the questions. Doug, is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up this session?
We actually had a couple more questions come in.
Okay, yeah, I see them now. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, how easy is it for app developers to use their techniques, these techniques?
But well, that's a great question. In fact, it's one of the lessons learned, I think, in the whole group experience that we need to abstract the consent management layer such that application developers really don't have to deal very much at all with that issue. In fact, it's one of the principal objectives of moving into the what we call consent management as a service onto the Microsoft cloud. So that again, just as application providers today sort of look at the consent, authentication, authorization generally as kind of handled below the application level, looking ahead to an era where fine-grained consents and more patient control will be the order of the day, whether it's Cures Act or this market force, where patients or individuals want control of their data in more than just an opt-in, opt-out, all or nothing sense. That will be a demanding challenge to everyone, application providers in particular. So to the extent that that can be just added on as an interstitial middle layer service in the cloud, we think that it will minimize the effort that application providers or healthcare providers for that matter, service providers generally, will have in accommodating the demands of this, incipient, fire-grained or fine-grained era. The other thing that it does, I think it's also important, is the idea of a DID or a decentralized identity able to associate itself with multiple identities gives the app provider and the patient both a way of bridging an application across multiple systems that otherwise can be done, but somewhat difficult. It can be very difficult, in fact. So the kind of Rosetta Stone of the decentralized identity can solve problems in, again, mapping across multiple EHRs as well.
Okay, super, Doug. Yeah, we got one last question. Is there anything FHIR specific in the design? It all seemed agnostic to FHIR to me.
Well, by design, it hopes to be able to adapt itself to any API. However, FHIR is obviously the most robust set of actual PHI kinds of resources. But we're also kind of hidden in the presentation, maybe is, we think, a clever way of increasing the reliability of the identity or the authentication itself, using patient or demographic resources as verifiable claims against an identity, so that if you need to prove your identity to a relying party, being able to cryptographically rely upon demographic data and financial data, other things that can be extracted from a FHIR server, is instrumental in creating that decentralized identity in the first place. So it uses FHIR as an authenticating tool as well as an app consuming of resources methodology.
Okay, Doug. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I think that's about it for now. We're running out of time. Delegates, we hope you found the session useful. Please do not forget to rate the presentation and use the Q&A functions. If you still have some questions, these QA functions will be open throughout the day today. So yeah, please go ahead and ask questions. Thanks for attending, and goodbye everyone, and see you later. Bye.